Hey, good Monday morning, and thanks for logging on to BAMWX.com for a long-range forecast update. Excited to be back after being out last week. Was in Virginia at the International Festival and Events Association, and had a great time. Got to talk with some of the largest event producers in the U.S., the Macy's Day Parade, the Kentucky Derby, the Memphis Rib Festival, all kinds of really neat stuff. Talk to those folks about their weather plans. So we've got a situation unfolding that is not good for harvest, and I, regardless of if we can calm it down in the second half of October, which is possible, I'm concerned that it's going to leave a pretty big mark with respect to rainfall and the harvest situation. So I'm a little concerned about that. So let's talk about it. Rainfall the last 7 days, obviously very hard hit north central or northern Indiana, southwest Michigan, central Illinois, and then down here across Missouri, southern Iowa. Looking at rainfall the next 7 days, forecast here of a model blend, if you will. You can see it shifts northwest just a tad and just pounds Wisconsin, Iowa, eastern Nebraska, Missouri, and Kansas. And then it will start to shift back east. And a lot of the folks in here that have gotten dry, if you will. Well, I should probably cut that down and through more like here because you're not that dry in here. But there's some hope in here. I don't know if you call it hope, but it might not come at the best time. But I do think that we will start to work moisture back into some of these drier areas. Interestingly enough, and winters to follow the snowfall outlooks when you have southeastern U.S. drier spots or droughts tend to be pretty snowy. We'll get to that here in just a little bit. But just look here at 10-day precipitation from the European model. Again, you can kind of see what happens is it kind of shifts, from here to here. And some decent hope here, or at least a bet for some rainfall. This is the next 5 days. You see where everything's kind of going up and around the periphery of the ridge. This is where temperatures are from normal. They're pretty doggone warm. But in the 5 to 10, we work that front in, and that front's pretty strong. And there's probably going to be some areas in here that get pretty cold, all right, in terms of temperatures. Some morning lows are certainly going to be pushing the envelope here. You get here to Wednesday morning, some temperatures as much as 15 degrees below the average. Here's Thursday morning. See some of the coldest temperatures out here in the central U.S. And then there's Friday morning. Again, some of these places are running as cold as 15 to 20 degrees below the average. And I do think that there could be some outlying areas that may need to be concerned for some frosty conditions. Now, if we look at the forecasted low temperatures from the European model, we'll start here by Wednesday morning. And again, you can see some 30s showing up in the Dakotas. And again, I hear a lot of people say, well, this is average stuff. And I understand that it is. No one's denying that. But what's not average is planted dates and the maturity level of the crop across the area. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that. All right. It doesn't, no one has to have any type of special knowledge to know that the late planted crop is going to be at risk with these types of temperatures. You have outlying areas in the 20s in the Dakotas and western Nebraska Thursday morning. And then you get into Friday morning, and you have outlying areas in the upper 30s. And my concern is that perhaps this could possibly be colder than modeled. Now here's Saturday morning. We'll spend a little bit of time on this because reinforcing colder air comes in next week. But again, several mornings in the 30s, and I think for especially the late planted beans and stuff, that can be of concern. All right, here's next Tuesday, next Wednesday. Now, next Wednesday morning on the European model has areas freezing by October 9th. And there's some temperatures in here that are below freezing, particularly just kind of in this area in general. So again, it's again, I know we're getting into a normal time of the year, but when you're 30 days late, some people more than that on planted, that's problematic in my opinion. That's something we have to factor in. And then you add in all the rainfall, and it's not a friendly pattern. It's really not. And the 1 to 5 day, it's highly amplified pattern is what's responsible for what brought all the active weather earlier on this year. But we have this big ridge, southwest flow aloft, and this highly amplified pattern where the flow is just going up, down, and around, and it's just very active. And the 5 to 10, the trough swings through, squashes the gradient a little bit. But there's indications that in the 10 to 15, especially with the way the AAM's looking, that this pattern could, again, come back. We think October overall in the east is pretty warm. And this is something here to keep in mind, that the activity may not subside. Now, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to show you click on my 7-day precipitation into week 2. This is the GFS model, which is kind of what we favor right now when looking at the gradient that could return. And you see that. And we look at this. Let's look here at the 14-day anomaly from that of the model. And you can see, of course, it doesn't want to plot for me now. You can see that it's pretty active in general with that last slide I showed you. We'll go back to that in just a second. Here's our official outlooks. All right, this is the week 1 and 2 temperature forecast. And again, with the general gradient in mind, all right, we'll be able to factor this in terms of just staying really, really active. And you see that right here. Here's our week 2 forecast from our latest handmade stuff. And again, it's very similar to 18 in a lot of ways in terms of how active it was, not friendly. And so you can see 200 to 300% of the normal still forecast here in the central portions of the country. Certainly not going to be the most friendly pattern, if you will. But some places need the rain. I guess that's kind of how do you want to look at this? Now, with the angular momentum, which this is a measure of the global winds, the lower this number gets, the slower the global winds go. All right, and what happens is that you get intense patterns, you get extremes. Look at the blizzard what's going on in the northwest U.S. Record snowfall up there. And then you have all the record heat going on. This is now the second warmest September ever on record. And, so these slow, these La Nina-like global winds, they've been negative for a couple of months now. I tell you, if this can continue into winter, we could be dealing with some serious cold. It's very interesting to see this, and it's certainly something that we are not ignoring. If you look at the European weekly, we would see somewhat of a subtle rise here by late October, but then it starts to fall again here into November. If you look at the angular momentum, we'll get a new outlook on this tonight, but a negative angular momentum into November is cold. When we look at our final October outlook, this is kind of the idea. There can be cold over the top. There can be fronts that continue to come in. The snowpack here will definitely help modify the air and keep things colder up here near the Great Falls area. And, it can be pretty doggone warm into the east for the most part. Now, there will be times, I think, where these fronts skirt through to the east that will make it cold in here. There will be some days where temperatures are below the average. I'm not denying that. But in terms of a HDD standpoint, not looking for anything, any big cold by any means from that standpoint. Northern Plains, you can still get cold, but here's the precipitation outlook. Again, keeping it pretty active in here. I think this continues to be a serious problem for harvest, and I think that again, a lot of the cold here early in the month, the first 15 days, can be problematic for late planted crop. Okay. Now, here's something of interest, and I'm going to wrap it up with sunspot numbers, and I'm looking at sunspot and the QBO. All right. Essentially, I'm looking for wind reversals here to start occurring in this area, start to see the blues working in. Okay. We start to trend our descending QBO. That's as much as I'm going to explain in this video today. We'll talk more about this in our webinar, but the descent of the QBO is more important than the actual value, or the trend, if you will. And then you look at the sunspot numbers. The gray line is the observed. If you zoom all the way in, this is the lowest level here now since 2009. Okay, and I would anticipate this to certainly continue, probably this winter and possibly next winter as well. But one has to argue and make the case that all this low sunspot, low solar activity, this is the last 3 months 500 millibar height anomalies. Okay, one has to make the case or wonder all of this high latitude blocking, if that does not continue into Two very strong features. The EPO, the NAO, and even the AO. One has to wonder if that correlation can continue into the colder months, and if it does, I think there can be a 5 to 7 week period this winter that's very cold, sustained cold. The question is going to be where. It's probably Great Lakes, Northeast focused if we had to make an early call on that. But certainly, it piques my interest when looking at this. If I looked at November now with all these correlations in mind, the QBO, the low solar index, the angular momentum, there's 3 features here that all line up. All right. And that is blocking, big trough, ridge. Blocking, big trough, ridge. All right, you see that? Blocking, big trough, ridge. All right, and this can mean, I think, that November has potential to be cold, especially across the northern tier, the northeast, maybe into the southeast. You're questionable along the southern coastal states, Texas into the desert southwest. But the northern plains, Great Lakes, northeast could be pretty cold into November. And I think that winter could probably get going late November into December with snowstorms and whatnot. And winter could start a little bit earlier this year if we continue to see this global wind pattern shaping up along with the tropical forcing, how it's been isolated and stalled, basically a standing wave in the colder phases of MJO there in the Indian Ocean. With the strong easterly zonal wind profile in the forecast and the negative AAM. I mean, basically what I'm saying here is that I do think that there can be some notable cold and some notable blocking. That's all I have for today. We could talk about this for a long time. If you have questions, reach out. Have a great week.